Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Tales of Home, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The ice screamed when it split, a high, torn metal sound that cut straight through the music drifting out of the Whitakers' boathouse. I didn't think, I didn't shout, I moved. There was a red life ring bolted to a post half buried under a drift of snow. I tore it free, ran the 10 yards to the black mouth, where the water had punched through and dropped to my knees so fast my bones rang. Eli's knit cap bobbed once, then vanished in a roll of air and sleet. Cold shock kills in breaths, not minutes. That's what a lifetime in emergency rooms teaches you. Control the gasp, find the bubbles, grab anything you can hook an arm through, and don't let go. I slid my left arm through the life ring, flattened my belly to spread my weight, and shoved the heel of my boot against the rim of the hole to stop the ice from crumbling further. The water bit like broken glass. I reached under. Nothing. Reached again deeper. My fingertips brushed wool, then the slick sleeve of his parka, then the thin bird bone wrist I knew as well as my own heartbeat. "I've got you," I said, mouthful of salt in winter and terror. He was limp. That scared me more than the water did. I hooked my hand into his hood, pulled until something in my shoulder tore hot and kicked for the surface. We hit the edge hard. The ice tried to shear us in two. I jammed my forearm across a lip and hauled him onto the crust, inch by inch, like dragging a deer out of a ditch. "Move," a voice behind me yelled. Hands several latched onto my coat, and his dragging us past the dangerous halo where the slush flexed. Boots thundered. Somewhere someone was sobbing. Sirens spun down the hill toward the lake, blue, then red, then blue again across the snow, and the boathouse lights kept waltzing to some string quartet Sloane insisted on even as the night went sideways. "Airway," I said, "because old habits don't die. Get me a blanket. Get me." "Station 12, a paramedic said, dropping to his knees at Eli's head. He looked 25 and competent. "I'm on it." Eli didn't open his eyes. His lips were the color of skim milk. Little rattles of breath came out of him, shallow and far away. I pressed the back of my hand to his chest. He was iced to the touch, a damp, frightening cold that felt like absence. "Name," the medic asked. "Eli O'Connor," I said. 8 years old, no known allergies. He was under less than a minute. "Good," the medic said, already sliding a probe onto Eli's finger. "Let's keep it that way." His partner popped open a foil blanket, the kind that snaps and whispers like a candy wrapper, and tucked it tight around Eli's shoulders. Warm packs went into the pits of his arms and along his ribs. A third responder planted a hand gently on my shoulder. "Ma'am, are you injured?" "I'm fine," I lied because my teeth were knocking so hard my jaw ached. "I am his grandmother." There was motion at the periphery. Sean stumbled toward us, tie-hanking eyes huge. Behind him, Sloane glittered in a silver dress meant for city photographs, not wind off the reservoir. She stopped dead when she saw the foil blanket and the line of steam coming off Eli's breath in the floodlights. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice too bright, too careful. "He fell through," I said. "Where were the boys?" "With the other children by the fire pit," she said, and the way her mouth made the words told me they'd been rehearsed somewhere between the boathouse bar and the lakeshore. "It's been safe all week." "No ice is safe. Not with children. Not at night." I swallowed the sentence. The medic squeezed a bag of warm air into Eli's lungs, slow and patient. The siren chirped closer, a wash of sound that made the trees shiver. "Let's move," the 25-year-old said. "Hypothermia protocol on the truck. You can ride with us," he added to me, like he already knew I was going to climb in, whether he permitted it or not. We lifted Eli as one, the way you lift the fragile and the precious. His eyelashes were rimmed in white. He didn't weigh anything at all. As we jogged toward the ambulance, my mind flicked unwanted to the boathouse an hour earlier. The donor wall gleamed in champagne light names etched into brass, arranged in tiers like a choir. I stood there holding Eli's paper cup of cocoa while he traced the letters with a sticky finger. "Why aren't we on here?" he'd asked. Because we don't write checks that get you your name on a wall, I said, keeping it light because he was 8 and not in the market for lectures. We show up, that's what we do. Brooks and Hunter had blown in right then, snow in their hair and that sharp wealth boredom glittering behind their grins. Brooks nudged Eli's cup with his elbow, a gentle joke with an edge. "Come on," he'd said. "We're checking out the boathouse. You can see the ice through the boards. It's sick. Stay where I can see you." I'd called, but the music rose and Eleanor Whitaker glided over with a hand on my elbow and a smile that felt like the underside of ice. She wanted to introduce me to someone who chaired something. She wanted to know if I might help just for a minute with coats near the service door. The boys disappeared into the night like sparks torn off a log. The back doors of the rig slammed. The presents snapped back hard and bright. I climbed inside, knees wet, face burning, and took the bench opposite Eli. The medic clipped a line, watched a monitor, kept his voice soft. "Eli," he said. "Buddy, you're okay, you're warm, you're in the truck with us." Eli's eyes fluttered. He made a small sound that might have been my name. Then a word that wasn't one word so much as the broken edge of two pushed me. When I said leaning in because you get one clean statement before fear rearranges the memory. "Tell me, baby." His lips barely moved. "Didn't step," he whispered. They said, "Prove it." The medic looked at me, then back at his patient. He didn't write it down. He didn't need to. It sat in the air like a new crack expanding under weight. The ambulance lurched forward. The rig filled with the warm plastic smell of oxygen and vinyl, the sweet faint scent of cocoa still clinging to Eli's hair, the iron smell of my wet gloves. I counted his breaths without meaning to. 12 in a minute, then 14. His fingers ghostly under the foil twitched. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, a small insistent insect against the tremor in my hands. Sean. Then a second later, Sloan. I didn't answer either. I stared at the LED numbers marching across the monitor, at the tiny pulse climbing and falling like a brave bird, and I thought of the donor wall again of names in brass, and the gap where a boy's safety should have been written in giant letters. We rolled under the ear canopy. The doors hissed bright light, exploded the edges of my vision, and the hospital swallowed us with that efficient hunger only hospitals have. A nurse met us with a warmed gurney and a practiced nod. "Let's go, kiddo," she said as if it were a game and he'd won some prize that required wheels. I stepped aside because I know when to step aside. 40 years in emergency rooms will teach you that too. The medic squeezed my arm once, quick and human, and then he was gone and Eli was gone, and the doors swung shut with their pneumatic sigh, and left me in a corridor that smelled like bleach and winter boots. Sean shouldered through a beat later, breathless. "Is he alive?" I said. "Cold. They'll do their work." He swallowed. Sloan arrived behind him, hair perfect, eyes wrong. "We'll make a statement," she said to no one in particular. "It was a weather-related accident on community property. We should get ahead of it." I stared at her. I didn't say what climbed hot and sharp to the back of my throat. I put my hand on the wall because my legs were shaking now that I had permission to feel them again. Mom Sean said, catching the shake like only your child can, "Sit. I'll get water." "I'm fine," I said, then reached into my coat, found my phone by feel, and thumbed the number I'd stopped dialing years ago. He picked up on the first ring. "Cal Mason." "It's Nell," I said. "Do what you have to do." A beat. "Tell me where you are." "Hudson Valley Medical," I said. "Eli's 8, hypothermia. He says he didn't step. He says they told him to prove it." Cal didn't curse. He didn't sigh. He made a sound like a pen uncapping and said, "I'm on my way," and then the line went quiet. I put the phone back in my pocket and waited, listening to the slow thud of my own heart and the faint mechanical whoosh of air behind the double doors. The ER clock had a second hand that stuttered instead of sweeping. It clicked around the face like a nervous fingernail. Every time it jumped, my jaw jumped with it. A pediatric nurse in soft sneakers and hard eyes came out through the double doors. "Eli O'Connor," she asked, voice pitched calm. "I am his grandmother," I said, already on my feet. He's responding, she said. Core temp was low. We're warming him with a forced air blanket and warmed IV fluids. Vitals are coming up. We'll keep him for observation. Can I see him? One at a time, short visit. Sean started forward, then stopped, glancing at Sloane. She held his sleeve with 2 fingers, a small claim staked in a public place. You go, he told me, please. The nurse led me down a corridor washed in light. The floor was speckled gray linoleum, the kind that never looks clean because it can't look dirty. In Eli's room, a bear hugger hummed like a hairdryer set to lullaby. His cheeks were no longer the color of skim milk. A plastic clip glowed red on his finger. A bear sticker grinned from the monitor like somebody thought that might help. Hey, honey, I said, keeping my voice low. You landed yourself a heated blanket. Fancy. His eyes opened by degrees, fog lifting off a river. Grandma, he said, small but sure. I took his hand and felt the warmth easing back under the skin. How's breathing? Okay. He looked past me toward the room's square of window where a snowplow light strobed orange on orange. His brow pulled tight. Am I in trouble? For what? For not proving it? The room tilted just a little. You don't have to prove anything I said, but the words were for me as much as for him. Focus on warm, doctors are happy, I'm happy, that's your job. He nodded once the way kids do when they're trying not to slide backward into sleep. I brushed the wet wing of hair off his forehead. The nurse at the foot of the bed watched clipboard loose against her hip. She was listening without acting like she was listening, which is an art. 2 minutes, she said gently. When I stepped back into the corridor, the world snapped loud again, an intercom tone wheels rattling, a printer spitting forms. Sean stood, hands twisted together. Sloane was on the phone, pinched between apology and authority. She clicked off when she saw me. How is he? Warming. The team's solid. Solid. Good, she said too quickly, as if checking a box. I've spoken to Avery. She handles communications for the foundation. We'll put out a statement, weather-related incident on community property, grateful for first responders, keep it simple, reduce speculation. Speculation about what I asked. Her well-crafted face didn't flicker. You know how people are online. They'll say anything. We get ahead of it. We stop the rumor mill. Rumors don't push children onto ice, I said. Sean's head came up. Mom, he said softly. What I asked him. He was with other kids. There was a lake. It's not a rumor. Sloane smoothed her cuff, careful and deliberate. Let's not add heat, she said. The Whitaker name is on a lot of projects in this town. Partners get jittery when words like negligence start floating around. The elevator at the end of the hall opened. Cal Mason stepped out like he'd been here 1,000 times and like he could vanish just as easily. The years had silvered his hair and sharpened his eyes. He wore a wool coat that didn't show road salt and a knit scarf someone had made by hand. He looked like a man who got where he was going. Nell, he said, no hug, just a warm squeeze of my forearm, just long enough to say I'm real. Cal, I said, and something in me that had been clamped since the lake loosened a notch. He clocked the room in a glance. Sean nerves guilt. Sloane composure lacquered on. The nurse's station opened sightlines, but privacy when you wanted it. He didn't take out a notebook. He didn't need to. Status, he asked. Warming and talking, I said. He said I stopped because the corridor had ears. Cal pivoted a half step so his back was to the flow of foot traffic. Understood, he said. Can you give me your code? I blinked. Why? You're soaked, he said, and it's evidence of nothing particular, but timestamps matter. I want it bagged and logged, at least my log. Same with your gloves. If somebody decides to argue about how long he was under or who was where, we'll prefer facts. I slid out of the coat. Water wept off the hem onto the tile. Cal produced a folded contractor-grade trash bag from his pocket like a magician with useful tricks. He wrote the date and time across the bag in block letters with a Sharpie, then added the location and my name. Chain of common sense, he said. Sometimes that's all you get. A woman in a winter white coat approached with the loose smile of someone who makes their living smoothing sheets without changing the mattress. Mrs. O'Connor, she said, turning to me, then to Sloane, as if in the same breath. Eleanor asked me to check on you all. I'm Avery. We handle communications for the foundation. Of course you do, I said. We're coordinating with the hospital, she went on unfazed. Release a quote, perhaps a photo when he's stable. There's concern about privacy, obviously, but transparency protects everyone. Transparency. Cal repeated, friendly as a doorman. Great word. Does transparency include mentioning that a group of miners were unsupervised near open water? Avery's smile held steady. We don't have those details. You're right, he said. You don't. The sheriff's office will be very interested when they do. Who are you? She asked, now measuring him. Friend of the family, he said, which was true enough. I also have an unhelpful habit of reading contracts and call logs. You might want to advise Eleanor that any attempt to modify or delete security footage from the boathouse or the gatehouse would be a poor choice. We're on community property, Avery said. There is no gatehouse. Cal looked at her, blinking once slow. There is always a gatehouse, he said. Sometimes it's a guard shack. Sometimes it's a Wi-Fi router with a camera nobody remembers installing. Sloane stepped between them with a smile that could have been used to carve ice. This is a hospital, she said. We're not arguing in a hallway. We're not arguing, Cal said mildly. We're stating the obvious. The nurse returned and nodded to Sloane. Mom can go in now, she said. 5 minutes. Sloane hesitated just long enough for me to see her picture, the room, the tubes, the sticker grin monitor. She touched her hair and went through the doors. Sean sat down hard on the plastic chair that squeaked in protest. I shouldn't have let them go to the lake, he said to the floor. I should have. You were inside with 50 adults and 2 bartenders, I said, easing down beside him. You thought they were by the fire pit. We make choices with the information we have. He shook his head. I've been trying to keep everyone happy, he said, voice thin. The Whitakers sign my checks, Mom. Their projects keep my guys working. I keep thinking if I just... He stopped because the end of that sentence shamed him. Sean, I said, your son is in that room. That's the center of the map. Yeah. He scrubbed his face with his hands. Yeah. Cal crouched, putting his eyes level with Sean's knees. I need a list, he said as if he were asking for a spare screw. Names of the kids by the lake. Which adults were designated to watch them. Who was near the boathouse. I'll pull call logs from tonight's first responder dispatch. I'll ask for the facility permit on the event. If the boathouse is technically public, the security camera feeds are discoverable. If it's private, they're still discoverable with the right nudge. Sean stared at him like a man who'd just realized the house he'd been living in had a foundation. I don't know all the kids, he said. I know Brooks, Hunter, the cousins. Start there, Cal said. Write what you know. Don't guess. Don't round. Eleanor Whitaker arrived in a cloud of expensive wool and colder air. A man in a law firm overcoat slid in her wake. Eleanor's lipstick didn't crack when she smiled. Nell, she said, tone-pitched to compassion. We're heartsick, all of us. I saw Eli. Darling boy. The doctor's confident. Good, I said. She turned her smile on Sean, then on Cal, deciding in real time where to place each of us on her chessboard. We're coordinating with Avery to make sure the community understands this was an accident, she said. The last thing anyone needs is noise. Noise, Cal said pleasantly, is what you get when people feel they aren't being told the truth. The truth, Eleanor said, gliding straight past him, is that winter is dangerous and boys are heedless. We will, of course, review safety protocols for events. She glanced at the lawyer. He gave her a small nod as if she'd stuck a landing only they could see. Who was assigned to watch the children, I asked. Everyone keeps an eye, she said. It's a community value. That's not an answer, I said. Her smile didn't move. The lawyer stepped in, measured and bland. Perhaps now isn't the time for pointed questions, he said. We're all thankful Eli is recovering. Let's allow the hospital to do its work. I looked from Eleanor to the lawyer, to Avery, to the open doors where warm air spilled into the hall like something generous. He says he didn't step, I said. He says someone said prove it. Silence made a small, precise circle around that sentence. Eleanor's smile dimmed 1 watt. Children say many things when they're frightened, she said. So do adults, Cal said. The nurse reappeared. We're moving Eli to a step-down room in PEDS, she said. 1 visitor for now. His father, I said before anyone could object. Sean stood as if pulled by a string. He looked at Eleanor, then at me, then at the doors. The chair made that same protesting squeak as it unweighted. When he'd gone, Avery exhaled through her nose. We'll send over the draft statement, she said. You can add a quote as family representative if you like. You don't speak for my family, I said. We speak for the Foundation's interests, she replied. They align more often than not. Not tonight, Cal said. Avery and the lawyer drifted back toward Eleanor, who was already tapping her phone with the careful concentration of someone rearranging people like place cards. Cal nodded down the hall. Walk, he said. We found 2 empty seats in the cafeteria where a vending machine sold ambition in tiny bags marked trail mix. Cal set the black bag with my coat beside his chair and pulled a pen from his pocket. He borrowed a napkin and wrote 3 words across the top, who, where, when. Talk me through the boathouse, he said. Start with the donor wall. I did the brass tears, the boys blowing in the way Eleanor separated me from the door, with a hand on my elbow that felt like a polite trap. Cal wrote phrases, not sentences. He asked what music was playing where the fire pit was, whether the back deck had salt down. He didn't tell me what he was going to do with any of it. He didn't need to. He finished writing, capped the pen, and looked up. I only ask this once, he said. When people in nice clothes discover they've lost control of a story, they get inventive. It won't be gentle. I carried him out of a hole in a lake, I said. Gentle was yesterday. Cal nodded once. All right, he said. Then we start with the tape. He folded the napkin and slid it into his coat pocket like something valuable. The cafeteria's heating unit kicked on with a metallic cough. Snow hissed against the high dark windows. Somewhere above us, a machine breathed warm air into a small boy's lungs and called it just another shift. Cal slid the napkin into his pocket like a signed check and stood. Tape first, he'd said. He didn't walk fast. He walked like the building belonged to him. By morning, the hospital had cycled from night ghost quiet to day shift busy. The pediatricist with the soft Ohio vowels said the words I wanted, stable, rewarming, well, no sign of aspiration. Eli blinked at me over the tent of the warm air blanket cheeks, pinking up voice a scratchy thread. Hurts, he said, and pushed at his wrist with his thumb. Where, I asked. Here. He showed me the inside curve of his wrist. The skin wore a set of fresh parallel scrapes, 3 little red tracks, like something rough had bit and slid. Not ice. Ice makes scallops and ragged flakes. This was grip burn, the kind you get when boys drag boys by sleeves. I didn't say that out loud. I took a breath that felt like it caught on a tooth. We'll tell the doctor, I said. Then you sleep. When he drifted off, I stepped into the hall and found Cal exactly where I'd left him, 6 hours and 1 coffee ago, not in the way, not out of it. He nodded once and I told him about the wrist. He listened without interrupting, then wrote nothing down, as if writing it would make it smaller. Where's Sean? He asked. Taking a shower where the soap doesn't smell like the ER, I said. He'll be back. He'll get a call, Cal, said no drama in it, just the way you say tomorrow's Wednesday. Eleanor will want his signature on something that soothes her sleep. We didn't wait long to be right. By 9, Sean was back with damp hair and eyes that looked like he'd squeezed them dry 3 times already. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and went a shade paler. Thomas wants me at the office, he said. Now. Do you want me there? I asked. He thought about it. Yeah, he said. Please. The WHITAKER building downtown had a lobby full of marble that was trying too hard. The security guard wore a blazer and carried nothing heavier than a crossword. On the 6th floor, a receptionist with a headset and a manicure could have worked for any company in any city, which I suppose was the point. Thomas Whitaker's conference room had a view over the river and a table long enough to land a small plane. He stood when we came in. Eleanor didn't. The firm's lawyer from the hospital hallway had already arranged his legal pad exactly parallel to the table edge. Sloane's chair was empty. Nell Thomas said, as if we were friends who'd had lunch last month. Sean, sit. Sean sat. I didn't. Cal wasn't with us, but he might as well have been. I heard his voice anyway, chain of common sense. Thomas steepled his fingers. We're relieved about Eli, he said. Scary night. But the town knows how winter is. Unfortunately, a story like this can be misinterpreted by those who don't wish the Whitaker Foundation well. We need to head that off. The lawyer slid a folder across the table with two hands. This is a standard non-disclosure agreement, he said as gently as a nurse offering pills. It protects the family and frankly you. With rumors flying, it's vital no one speculate in public. Speculate, I said. That's a new synonym for describe. Nell Thomas said, a smile stitched to his face. We're not enemies here. We're not allies, I said. Sean Eleanor said as if I'd never opened my mouth. You've been invaluable on the riverfront bid, and we'd like to formalize that. Project director, salary adjustment, company car if you want it. In exchange, you keep the situation from devolving, keep your team focused, keep feelings out of it. Sean looked at the folder. He didn't touch it. What do I have to not say, he asked. That this was anything but an accident, the lawyer said. That you witnessed anything. I didn't, Sean cut in. I was inside. Exactly, the lawyer said, as if Sean had helped him demonstrate a point for a jury. So you can sign in good faith. Does the NDA ask me to keep my son from speaking? Sean asked. Silence buckled under the weight of that question. Eleanor's lipstick didn't move. Thomas drew a line on the table with his forefinger, invisible but definite. We're talking about craft, he said. About avoiding turbulence in a delicate moment for the foundation. Sean's laugh came out small and wrong. You're talking about putting tape over a kid's mouth, he said. And over mine. Nobody's asking you to lie, Eleanor said. We're asking you to be prudent. Nobody asked Eli to be prudent, I said. Sean stood so fast the chair legs hiccuped. He pushed the folder back across the table. I won't sign, he said, voice steady now. I'll keep my crew on their work because they've got mortgages, but I won't sign. Thomas' eyes cooled. Think carefully, he said. This town is small, Sean. Reputations are smaller, Sean said. I'm going back to the hospital. We walked out without the folder. My legs felt like wood, like I'd borrowed them. In the elevator, Sean put his head against the metal wall and breathed once like a diver. Proud of you, I said. Don't, he said. I'll crack. The town ran on schedules and committees, and by evening the planning board was packed shoulder to shoulder in a room that had never seen this much perfume. The agenda said discussion of tax abatement for riverfront residences, which meant the Whitakers expected a rubber stamp. The clerk wore a sweater with a snowflake right where his heart would be. Avery was there, and the lawyer, and half a dozen people who owed the family invitations to fundraisers. Cal leaned against the back wall with the legal pad he didn't use. A reporter I knew by face, not by name, fiddled with the recorder and tried to look invisible. Public comment opened. A man from the Carpenters Union spoke first. Jobs, jobs, jobs. A schoolteacher followed. If you abate taxes, you starve classrooms. A woman in a puffer coat talked about her rent. She didn't look at the Whitakers when she mentioned mold. Then Cal raised a hand like he was about to ask a question in church. The board chair looked relieved. At least he knew Cal's name. Cal Mason, he said when recognized. Resident. IFOIL requested the event permit for last night's gala. It lists the boathouse as community property under a shared use agreement with the Town Parks Department. That makes any building security cameras subject to FOIL. I also pulled the procurement file on Riverfront. The bid specs reference a proprietary facade system that's only used by one supplier owned by a golfing buddy of Mr. Whitaker's. That's called a baked spec. The room made a sound, not a gasp, exactly more like the hush a crowd makes when the curtain twitches. The board chair glanced at the town attorney, who lifted a shoulder in a lawyer's shrug. Avery smiled like she had a sweater on under her skin. We're proud of our public-private partnerships, she said, stepping into the space Cal had made. The foundation has always worked transparently with the town. Cal nodded. Great, he said. Transparency makes the next part easy. My foil also turned up a service invoice from January for boathouse camera maintenance. It includes a note about a cloud backup. If any footage is missing from the device on site, we can retrieve it. Eleanor stood, then slow and elegant, as if rising from a piano bench. Out of respect for the board's time, she said, "We propose postponing tonight's vote until this confusion is resolved. We care deeply about process." The chair, grateful to be told what to do in the language of neutrality, banged the gavel and postponed the vote. It wasn't a win that tasted like sugar, but it wasn't a loss. People filed out into the cold, talking in a new key. I could hear it in their voices, the point at which deference thins. Back at the hospital, Eli's room was warm and small and smelled faintly of bubblegum tongue depressors. He slept with his mouth open the way he did as a toddler. Sean sat in the visitor chair, elbows on knees, phone face down. The TV on the wall played a nature documentary with the sound off. Wolves ghosted across snow. My phone buzzed. A push alert from the local Gazette Whitaker Foundation contracts raised questions. The photo was a file shot of Eleanor shaking hands with a mayor who retired 2 elections ago. The article was careful, like a man stepping through a glass shop. Procurement overlaps change orders. Ballooning mid-build a line about concerns regarding event safety near public water. It was written without adjectives and with receipts. The hallway went bright in a way that meant only one thing: new uniforms. The sheriff's deputies didn't hurry. They didn't have to. They handed a sheaf of papers to the hospital's security staff, then headed past me with soft, embarrassed nods, as if collecting signatures at a wedding. A woman with a badge that said Assistant De trailed with a banker's box. On the lid, someone had written Whitaker Foundation Fin in red marker. Cal appeared not out of thin air, but so quietly it felt like it. "Search warrant on the foundation office," he said, like he was telling me there'd be lasagna for lunch. "How?" "CFO," he said. "Her name's Marla Pike. People like Marla never go first. They go second when they realize first is gone." We watched through the glass as the deputies walked past the gift shop, full of teddy bears and mugs with the hospital logo. It takes a certain kind of town to run legal errands in a pediatric wing. Or maybe that's every town. I went back into Eli's room and touched his sock with 2 fingers the way you test a loaf of bread for spring. Warm. Sean looked up. I showed him the headline. He blew out air like a man who'd been holding it a very long time. Sloan didn't come that evening. She texted Sean a string of messages with no verbs meeting. Lawyers. Foundation. Mom's house. He texted back what mattered. He's sleeping. Warm. I slept for 2 hours in a chair with a line across my back that would announce itself tomorrow. When I woke, the sky was a bruised blue, and the snow had turned to rain, that slick, mean rain that lifts ice up and lays it down again where you're not looking. I walked the hallway because sometimes walking is the only way to keep from rusting shut. In the morning, the nurse helped Eli drink warm apple juice. He made a face and drank anyway. Kids are braver than the people who teach them the opposite. By lunch, the Gazette had followed with another story. Source inside Foundation cooperating. They didn't name Marla. They didn't have to. People in this town can do math. In the early afternoon, while Eli built a fort out of the hospital pillows and declared himself king of the land of disposable socks, my phone buzzed again. Not the Gazette, not Sean, not Cal, Sloan. Do you have a minute?" The text read, alone. I stepped into the family room at the end of the hall. It had a coffee machine that made coffee in name only, and a love seat that remembered too many people. Sloane's face filled my screen when the call connected, lit by the cold light of a laptop. "I have admin access," she said without hello. Her voice was wrong around the edges, as if she'd tried to make it square and it wouldn't fit. "For the boathouse system." I didn't know I did, but I dumped old credentials in a file when we switched over last year. "Okay," I said. "There's a cloud mirror?" she said. Cal was right about the mirror. Somebody tried to delete the local feed around 9 last night. The mirror doesn't care about local. She turned the laptop so her camera looked at the screen. A grainy wide-angle shot of the boathouse deck filled the frame. Snow blew diagonally across the lens. 4 small figures in puffy coats stood within the spill of light that weird green-white security cameras make out of night. 3 moved together, choreographed by the bad rhythm of boys who don't think anything bad can happen to them. 1 smaller hung back. Sloane scrubbed the timeline forward with 2 fingers. The smaller figure shifted closer to the edge as if pulled by rope. One of the bigger boys stepped in behind him and shoved, not hard, not with malice in the posture, just the casual testing kind kids use when they've never been made to carry weight. Another boy laughed. The smaller figure windmilled, caught himself. Skated the edge, found a patch where the light went dull. And then there was no smaller figure, only a sudden wrong darkness and 2 bright bodies jolting backward in shock. The clip froze on the flinch. For a second, I saw my own face reflected over the image, pale and unslept, a ghost laid over a bad painting. "Do you know which is which?" I asked. Sloane didn't answer right away. Her breath hitched once, just enough to fog the corner of the screen. "I do," she said. Her voice had dropped to the level of a confession in a church nobody goes to anymore. "I know exactly who they are." She didn't close the laptop. She didn't speak again. She just let the frame sit there, the edge of the deck in its ugly green-white, the empty space where a boy had been, the movement frozen at the moment before regret learns its name. The clip ended, and the room went quiet enough for me to hear the laptop fan. Sloane's face was turned to glass. She didn't cry. She didn't justify. She forwarded the file to an address Cal texted without his name attached, then closed the lid like she was lowering a casket. By late afternoon, deputies carried out boxes from the foundation office labeled in the squared-off handwriting of a man who prints his conscience. The assistant DA didn't smile. In small towns, even good days taste like someone else's loss. Eli slept. Sean read the patient education sheet they hand every parent after cold water tries to make a home in a chest. He read it twice. I drank coffee that remembered being beans a long time ago. The next morning, the town woke up to words that used to belong to other places. Self-dealing baked specs obstruction. Marla, the CFO, became a cooperating witness. The foundation board scheduled an emergency meeting, then canceled it when half the board discovered they had conflicts that looked like invoices. Thomas didn't swagger anymore. He walked into the courthouse with his jaw set and his tie a little off-center, the way men do when they can't find the mirror they used to believe in. He stood up in open court and said guilty to counts that wore strange long names, but boiled down to paying friends with public money and pretending it was generosity. The judge set a date. Thomas nodded once like a man taking a number at a deli. The boathouse property and the big house above it slid into that legal winter called protective custody. No galas, no guests. Locks for everyone, even people who thought they were the locks. Cal worked like the business end of a snowplow. He ate in the car and returned calls on the walk to the next call. He sat with a cluster of pastors and union reps and a banker who'd grown up on the wrong side of the river and never forgot how it felt. He said community land trust and mission covenant, and we keep it off the auction block so it doesn't turn into more luxury boxes with kitchens. He asked me to come to one meeting and keep my mouth open just enough for a yes and shut for everything else. Who runs it? The banker asked, palms flat on the conference table like he was holding something still. The community, Cal said. With receipts, we build houses people can pay for. We put a workshop in the boat shed. We turn the lawn into a garden the town can eat. We get the county to match our dollars with the money they keep in couch cushions for the word affordable. The county liked the optics of fixing a mess with the messmaker's money. Papers got filed. A judge initialed something with a pen like a sword. A grant officer showed up in a sweater and enthusiasm. When the property finally legally landed, it didn't crash. It settled like a late snow that remembers the ground. Sloane left the house she'd never paid for with 2 suitcases and a nervous plant. She took an apartment that came with radiators that banged pipes like ghosts and windows that faced a brick wall painted the color of patience. She started a job at a daycare near the commuter rail teachers, aid money coffee can budgeting. She sold bracelets that told one story to pay for a new one that didn't need captions. She didn't ask me for help and didn't refuse it when I offered rides. We learned the particular manners of people who need to be decent to each other and can't use the past tense to do it. The juvenile office sat behind a DMV that smelled like rubber bands. Brooks and Hunter sat in plastic chairs with shoelaces that needed tying and faces that couldn't decide between defiance and shame. Their mothers wore coats that tried to do the talking. The probation officer had a voice that could quiet a dog and a way of looking at boys as if they could handle the truth if somebody finally handed it to them. "We're doing restorative," she said. "You apologize to the person you hurt. You hear what it cost him. Then you work." Eli didn't want to go. He also didn't want to not go. He held my hand and then dropped it, and then took it again like a man stepping from stone to stone across a creek he thought might be deeper than it looks. In the circle room, the chairs squeaked and the carpet had the sad geometric pattern all government carpets have. Brooks kept his eyes on the floor. Hunter did the same, but not in unison. The probation officer set the rules and made everyone repeat them. One person talks at a time. Nobody pretends this didn't happen. Nobody walks out with the victory parade. Eli spoke second because the second speaker doesn't have to clear the path and doesn't have to carry the last word. He said, "I got cold and I have dreams about the hole, and when I hear somebody laugh, I want to go home." He didn't say you ruined anything. He said, "I want to play outside and not be scared of edges." Brooks said, "I thought it was nothing, and my chest hurts when I think about it, and I told my mom it was an accident because she told me to call it that." Hunter said, "Me too," which for once wasn't a dodge. The probation officer turned to me. "Do you want to say something?" "No," I said, and then I did anyway. "We all owe somebody for keeping us alive when we were dumb," I said. "Just make sure you pay the right person." They worked. The terms weren't neat and they weren't soft. They put on safety glasses and learned to measure from the right edge. They sanded splinters and didn't get to skip the corners. They hauled compost and listened to a man in a Red Sox cap explain why you don't overwater tomatoes. They took out trash without taking pictures. They did Saturday mornings where other kids did indoor soccer. Nobody clapped. People nodded. Sean signed an employment agreement with Cal that had exactly one paragraph more than the law required a paragraph about lying written like it had been copied out of a catechism. He took on a crew that included a welder who worked nights and a woman who could run conduit through a wall without waking a sleeping baby in the next room. He drew lines on paper and then in chalk on floors and then in the air with his hands when the paper wouldn't lie flat. I watched roofs go on. I watched a crane set a beam and a dozen men and 2 women tap it into place with hammers and pride. I watched a kid with a skateboard teach a board member how to use a cordless drill. The board member stripped a screw and then stripped another and then learned to let the drill do the work. The kid didn't laugh. The boathouse became a workshop that smelled like cedar and glue and coffee. We hung pegboard. We painted the concrete floor a gray that didn't show every bruise. Men who'd age out of factories taught a handful of teenagers to square a miter and to check twice before you cut because wood keeps a record. Up the hill, the big house traded its chandeliers for LED panels you could reach with a step stool. We turned the formal dining room into a community kitchen. The old parlor became counseling rooms with doors that closed soft. We left one fireplace intact because a place needs one thing that remembers the old name to make peace with the new one. People kept showing up with what they had. A retired librarian who knew how to make after-school kids sit down and read for 20 minutes without calling it detention. A nurse who could take blood pressure without making a man feel like a statistic. A florist who hated waste and taught 4th graders how to make centerpieces for the weekly potluck out of whatever the grocery store couldn't sell. Sloan asked the principal at a public middle school if she could use a classroom after hours. She talked about social pressure like an instrument you learn to put down. She called it a club because program tastes like vegetables. She put kids in circles without pictures and asked them to model apologizing out loud. She sold a pair of earrings I'd seen in a red carpet photo to buy church basement pizza for an entire semester. Parents signed permission slips and then came themselves. Nobody wrote a press release. When the first phase opened, nobody cut a ribbon. We strung cafe lights that would look tacky in June and perfect in December. Somebody brought a Bluetooth speaker. Somebody else baked too many brownies. The town arrived in boots and good jackets and the bad ones you keep for salt days. Children ran in that exact zigzag-only children pattern. The guys in hard hats stood a little taller because they had permission. Cal handed me a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and blue painter's tape. Inside lay a piece of plain cherry the size of a book, the surface hand smooth, the edges eased. Eli had burned letters into it with a wood-burning pen and the concentration of an 8-year-old with a job. No one stands alone. Your grandson made that, Cal said like I hadn't read it already 3 times with my fingers. Eli stuck close the way kids do in crowds until they remember crowds aren't wolves. He took the sign from my hands and carried it down to the boathouse. Brooks and Hunter were there in work gloves and community service vests nobody mentioned. Sean had a drill. He measured twice. He marked the studs with pencil. He set the screw and let Eli pull the trigger. The sign bit into new wood with a sound like a seat saved for you. Eli stepped back and looked at the line of letters. He didn't smile big. He let the corners of his mouth tip up just enough to register with his eyes. Behind us, the workshop hummed a Sanders Low song, a saw-stopping and starting voices moving through the rooms, like something you can stand inside. We stood there long enough to feel the heat that comes back to your hands when you've been cold too long. Outside the reservoir held its new ice like a careful idea, and the path to the shore wore rope and a sign and footprints that stopped where they should. A year later, the garden at the bottom of the hill carried the weight of August. Tomato vines leaned into their cages like tired men on bar stools. Sunflowers guarded the fence. Bees did their busy arithmetic in the squash blossoms. Eli came up the path with his t-shirt sticking to his back and both hands cupped around 3 warm tomatoes. For the kitchen, he said, solemn as a ring bearer. In you go. I told him, opening the service door with my hip. The old dining room, the one that used to hold 12 chairs and one conversation, was now a kitchen full of clatter and cinnamon. Volunteers chopped and stirred. A girl from the high school washed lettuce with the seriousness of a lab tech. Someone pushed a pan of peach cobbler into the oven, and the room exhaled sugar. Sean stuck his head through the doorway, pencil behind his ear. Shelves level, he announced, proud without showing off. Let's act surprised, I said. He disappeared back into the hallway, where 2 apprentices argued quietly over the right anchor for plaster that had seen 3 centuries and too many paint colors. The boathouse hum floated up from the slope, Sanders soft and steady. Through the open window, I could read the grain of the sign Eli burned last winter. No one stands alone. The letters had weathered just enough to look like they belonged there. Sloan arrived after the afternoon shift at the daycare, hair pulled into a knot that didn't pretend to be anything else. She carried a grocery sack of paper plates and a construction paper banner a second grader had lettered in wobbly purple, "Welcome anyone." She found Eli before she found me. "Hey," she said, hands in the back pockets of her jeans. "Can I steal you for 2 minutes?" Eli shrugged the way boys do when they've decided not to make it easy or hard. They took 2 chairs in the hallway under a framed map of the river. "I told people it was an accident," Sloan said. She didn't angle her face for a softer light. "I did that because I was scared. It made your life smaller. I'm sorry." Eli looked at his sneakers. "I still don't like the lake," he said. "You don't have to," she said. He nodded once. "Want to see the birdhouse I made?" he asked, as if that were the price of admission. "I do." They went outside together past the basement door, where the makerspace smelled like sawdust and coffee. On the boathouse porch, Brooks and Hunter were already in gloves stacking scrap into the bin, without being told which way the grain ran. The probation officer watched from the ramp with the kind of attention that counts without hovering. Eli pointed to the birdhouse bolted under the eave, cedar edges straight, hole neat, a little porch for landing. "It's good," Sloane said. "It looks like a place that means it." Back in the kitchen, the cobbler's crust had gone the right color. We let it rest on the counter, hissing softly. Cal showed up with a sleeve of paper cups and a case of seltzer shoved against his hip. He didn't make an entrance. He stood at the 3-compartment sink and rolled his sleeves and washed until the stainless was honest again. "You'll prune the mint next time," he said, nodding at the herb jars by the window. "It's threatening a coup." "Add it to the board," I said, handing him a towel. Twilight came down in that Hudson Valley blue that makes white paint glow. We ran extension cords and lit the cafe bulbs Sean hated and then learned to live with. Families drifted toward the long tables we'd built in the winter palms on the wood like a greeting. Somebody put on a playlist that shimmied from Motown to a song you hear in every gym. A toddler made a break for the hill and was intercepted at the rope without a scene. We ate what we grew and what we bought with coupons and what somebody's uncle dropped off at 4 o'clock because his restaurant had misordered peaches. The cobbler went out in squares that didn't quite hold their shape. Plates came back scraped clean. The room blurred with that easy talk you get when nobody at the table needs convincing. Sloane sat with a circle of middle schoolers and drew a diagram on a paper placemat, a line between funny and mean that moved when you listened. The kids argued and listened and then argued better. No one took a photo. Eli drifted between tables with a water pitcher like a maitre d' still learning his trade. Later, when the trays were stacked and the last pan squeaked under a sponge, we stepped outside. The hill kept the day's heat the way old houses keep secrets. Down by the boathouse, the sign took the string lights and gave them back softer. Crickets started their electric hymn. The reservoir carried a dark skin of wind. Eli leaned against me the way he used to when he was smaller, and sleep found him standing up. His hair smelled like soap and sun. Sean walked past with a screwdriver poking from his back pocket and tapped the porch post twice the way carpenters bless things. Sloane tossed the last bag into the dumpster and wiped her hands on her jeans and didn't check her phone. In the kitchen, the cobbler pan cooled to silence. I lifted a corner with a fork and tasted what was left warm in the middle edges going chewy. Cinnamon butter, the push and give of fruit that had been sweet before we touched it. Lights pooled on the grass. The building breathed like a thing that had settled into its name. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.